Good morning, everyone. Morning, morning, morning. It is Monday, October 9th. Woo. October 9th. So we have started to cross into the halfway point of October. And what a weekend it was, right? Filled with a lot of geopolitical news, a lot of disruption and um, activity in the Middle East specifically, right? These are things that, of course, it's a broader spectrum. Everyone on social media and Twitter is now claiming that they're an expert in the Middle East. So they've been an expert in everything that has gone on so far. I'm not going to pretend like I have any idea of what generally has happened. Well, generally speaking, I have some idea, but I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. I'm not going to comment too much on the issue, right? I don't want to overstep any areas that I don't have expertise in or any significant knowledge of this, right? Opinions and whatnot aren't necessarily used for trading in this circumstance, right? So overall, right, there was a conflict, right? A rising conflict by Hamas in terms of an attack on Israel this past weekend, right? There were a lot of airstrikes, and this is continuing, right? It's been an ongoing issue for quite some time now, but the effects on the market have been seen naturally, right? Very similarly to when Russia actually imposed an attack on Ukraine, we got this gap down, we got this downward movement. Now, as terrible as it may sound, right, I think this fear does get bought realistically. That's what I've been talking about with our trading team in our trading room on Discord on the overnight session, right? What I was saying was, listen, I'm going to be buying dips all night realistically. Um, there's some bid that's holding this out. Now, from Friday's drastic pump throughout the whole day, right? I'm going to talk a little more about that. Talk about a few other things and events throughout the week that we do have some anticipation on. But let's dive into this first a little more, right? We saw that crude oil WTI, right? November crude oil rose as high as 87 and $39 per barrel on Sunday, while the December Brent crude climbed to 89.15 per barrel, right? December COMEX gold rose more than 1%. And in these are due to the fear that's been rising from what had happened in the Middle East. Realistically, analysts generally expect a knee-jerk surge in crude oil prices, but limited gains thereafter, providing the conflict does not necessarily expand into a regional war, which is far from certain, obviously, since the fighting is on the doorstep of a lot of oil-producing, exporting regions. Now, it's not directly correlated to any of these regions, but right, it is fairly close. So things can escalate, but the medium term expectations for the rise based on specifically this, right, is pretty low for crude oil, right? Oil fundamentals have not necessarily changed since the attack. It doesn't mean that they won't realistically, right? A lot of things are uncertain, flagging that there are risks in oil supply, right? If Iranian involvement in the attack is affirmed and confirmed, the U.S. could step in and sanction Iranian crude exports. And if Israel were to strike any Iranian infrastructures, obviously the crude prices would spike and reflect this immediately. So Biden administration had hoped to broker a Saudi-Israel deal in the next 6 months, but these escalating situations in Israel have likely dashed hopes for a normalized relation between the countries. And Saudi Arabia is not expecting to slow oil production, although there is a risk of Saudis unwinding their additional voluntary supply. And the surprise attack also leaves Israel unlikely to make any concessions to the Palestinians that the Saudi government might have sought. So generally, stock market down, right? We gapped down on the S&P. The ES futures, we closed around 43.45 on Friday. We opened around 43.12, right? I was a buyer at 43.10 for a little pop. Then I was a buyer pretty much the whole way down. Sorry, not the whole way down. I wasn't buying everything, but I was a buyer down into the 0304. That was my key distribution area, my key order flow pivot for these guys to hold. And you can see they've bid that area all night long that we were talking about in Discord. Now, we dropped safe havens have popped a little, right? The US dollar rose 0.4%, crossing 106, while the Japanese yen, another traditional safe haven, upticked only 0.1% to 149.15 per dollar. So the US bond market is closed for Columbus Day, right? Today is Columbus Day. Banks are closed as well, suggesting that there could be less volume and volatility in the market. However, with the current situation, with the current conditions, right, that can change, and it could be a more robust day realistically in trading. We've seen that defensive stocks naturally rose before the market open here. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, right? Ticker symbols LMT, RTX, and GD, respectively. Airlines are down pretty aggressively, suspended flights directly from Israel and to Israel. In terms of DAL, UAL, AAL, naturally trading about 2% lower in turn. So, generally speaking, and that's the main piece of information that I think a lot of people are gauging and looking at here pre-market. And a lot of people have gone to Twitter, they've gone to social media, and proven that they are indeed experts of all situations, war, stock market, and the Middle East, right? I say this facetiously because it's just not true. Everyone just has their own opinion. And they just keep spouting nonsense realistically. So be very, very cautious about what you read, who you follow, and what news to trust, especially in relation to the stock market. So keep that in mind, right? I have a little bullish sentiment going into this. I understand that that may seem a little outrageous considering what's going on, but we'll see how this order flow pivot does hold. We'll break a few of these things down. Now, we do have CPI data that comes out later this week, which originally was supposed to be a much more calming sideways movement in the market until that data came out. PPI is on Wednesday, CPI is on Thursday pre-market. That inflation data is going to give us a good understanding of what it is that the Fed's doing and what's going on. Remember, Friday we had the jobs numbers that rose almost double from the expected. Now, keep in mind, if you break it down, the part-time jobs were the ones that were aggressively added. The full-time jobs actually decreased on the month-to-month basis. And technically speaking, the market initially dropped on the news because massive adds to the job market suggest a tighter labor market, which puts upside pressure on inflation. Now, CPI, we saw a recent 14% drop in crude oil price over the last few trading sessions, right before, obviously, today. And generally speaking, when crude oil drops, when oil and gas prices drop, you do have a subdued inflation reading, which I'm expecting to see get reflected in this week's CPI. So again, we'll see how that shapes up. We'll see how these things progress realistically. But as it stands, am I super bearish on the current market conditions? Not necessarily. I think that a lot of the dips do get bought this week. I don't necessarily think that we've seen the bottom either in the market. On this last leg. The next 1 to 2 weeks are going to be very pivotal for that to shape up. And I think we do maybe head fake the lows, dump a little lower, sweep some stops, then get that rally. But I think that these dips this week, right, immediately are going to get bought up, and we'll see how these escalations continue and how they progress, right? Keep in mind, this isn't a new event, right? As sad as it is, realistically, this conflict in the Middle East has been going back and forth for a very long time now. So it's a jolt and a quick reaction from markets in relation to what had happened. Now, we also have earnings this week. The earnings season is kicking off. We got banks like JP Morgan reporting. The biggest bank is reporting this Friday before the market opens. Some other banks are reporting too. I just can't remember which ones. We have, what else do we have? I think like Pepsi reports. We got a few not super important names other than like JP Morgan and some of the banks that report on Friday. But as the weeks progress, we're going to see how big tech reports, which is going to be at the headline figure for a lot of people, right? A lot of people are going to be watching an analyst, so on and so forth, are going to have eyes on what is going on with big tech in terms of earnings. Now, keep in mind the Q3 earnings, which is what we're getting now, is to be expected a little kind of flatlined, right? Maybe slightly lower in terms of growth than expected. And then Q4, which is the final quarter of this year, in Q1 2024, do have the expectations to see an increase in earnings and earnings growth to propel some more of that upside. So we'll see how that kind of shapes up. So if I look at the S&P 500 futures right now, and I'm looking at this from a technical and order flow perspective, yes, we've opened below a distribution block. I was looking for a pullback from the Friday session. Obviously, there was news and a eruption of conflicts that caused a lot of this. So we couldn't get that pull down. So now I'm looking to see if we can actually sustain this bid. Anything above 43.01, 03 area, I think buyers are going to attempt to hold that long realistically. When we get to 27.28, there's a lot of resistance there. And then the top end of the area around 35.37 is another large resistance point where there's gonna be activity realistically to try to sustain prices below that region. Anything back above, realistically, we can start making that move to 4,400. That's the upside target for this week. I think there's going to be some kind of bullish momentum into the end of the week, right? I can see the CPI coming out a little lighter than expected, and a lot of people getting pretty excited about that. A lot of people are talking about a hot CPI print. I don't see the metrics for it realistically. Obviously, I'm not here to predict things. I'm not here to anticipate what a news event is going to come out as, but I could see CPI coming out a little weaker than they expect, which is necessarily good, right? The bullishness in the bullishness in that comes from a subdued inflation. So realistically, I'll be taking a look at what's going on here today to break down futures, right? We're going to open up our futures room in a few minutes where we're going to be trading this thing live and seeing the opportunity. Realistically, right, there is the possibility that we do have a little slowdown with volume pulled out of the market due to Columbus Day. But generally speaking, with the news that happened over the weekend, I think that's going to be counterbalanced and you're going to have a pretty good, I think lower volume day in general, right? I'm not going to be super aggressive about trading today. Realistically, I'm in cash. What's a good day trade? I don't know. It depends on what happens. Today's a day like that's a crazy question. Today's a day that if you're new to trading, honestly, just observe. These are event days combined with Columbus Day. Realistically, I'm probably going to be getting long equities, so like indices, whatever. That's what I'm looking for. But manage risk. Remember, you can check out our free futures trading course, which is on our website. And with that, let's open up our futures trading room. Realistically, today could be very aggressive. Volatility could spike. We could have some choppy, weird movement. So just keep that in mind, right there. There's a lot of this is news driven as well. So let's see how this does shape up. I'm looking a little bullish to start the week, and start the day. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards a little. But again, we have to manage that risk. Realistically, right? No trade is a trade. I'm going to be looking to see if this upside exploration lasts throughout the day, right? I think a lot of people are going like macro bear and like geopolitical bear on this without having understood what prior situations like this have shaped up to be. So with that being said, I hope everyone has an amazing start to the week, right? If you're not doing anything, right, it's Columbus Day. If you're not even sure as to what you're doing, you're asking me what trade to take, honestly, just go enjoy the day. Preserve the capital, like Mary says. There's no point in putting risk on if you have to ask me what the trade is, right? It's enjoy the Columbus Day. So I'll see you guys soon, and we'll do this again tomorrow. Check out our free Discord, community.tradeproacademy.com, and check out our newsletter as well, right? Every week we post a newsletter with some trade ideas and a breakdown of the week, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.